Okay, I want to do chapter 5 of the Gospel of St. Luke. This is the Douay Rheims Catholic translation of the Bible. Okay? Chapter 5. The miraculous draught of fishes, the cure of the leper and of the paralytic, the call of Matthew. And it came to pass that when the multitudes pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesareth, and saw two ships standing by the lake. But the fishermen were gone out of them, and were washing their nets. And going into one of the ships, that was Simon's, he desired him to draw back a little from the land. And sitting, he taught the multitudes out of the ship. Now when he had ceased to speak, he said to Simon, "Launch out into the deep, and let down your nets for a draught." And Simon answering said to him, "Master, we have labored all the night, and have taken nothing. But at thy word I will let down the net." And when they had done this, they enclosed a very great multitude of fishes, and their net broke. And they beckoned to their partners that were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they were almost sinking. Which when Simon Peter saw, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he was wholly astonished, and all that were with him, at the draught of fishes which they had taken. And so were also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were Simon's partners. And Jesus said to them, to Simon, "Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men." And having brought their ships to land, leaving all things, they followed him. And it came to pass, when he was in a certain city, behold, a man full of leprosy, who seeing Jesus, and falling on his face, besought him, saying, "Lord, if thou wilt, thou can make me clean." And stretching forth his hand, he touched him, saying, "I will, be thou cleansed. And immediately the leprosy departed from him. And he charged him that he should tell no man, but go, show thyself to the priest, and offer for thy cleansing according as Moses commanded, for a testimony to them. But the fame of him went abroad the more, and great multitudes came together to hear and to be healed by him of their infirmities. And he retired into the desert and prayed. And it came to pass on a certain day, as he sat teaching, that there were also Pharisees and doctors of the law sitting by, that were come out of every town of Galilee and Judea and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was to heal them. And behold, men brought in a bed a man who had the palsy, and they sought means to bring him in and to lay him before him. And when they could not find by what way they might bring him in, because of the multitude, they went up upon the roof and let him down through the tiles with his bed into the midst before Jesus. Whose faith, when he saw, he said, "Man, thy sins are forgiven thee." And the scribes and Pharisees began to think, saying, "Who is this who speaketh blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" And when Jesus knew their thoughts, answering, he said to them, "What is it you think in your hearts? Which is easier to say, Thy sins are forgiven thee, or to say, Arise and walk? But that you may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins. He saith to the sick of the palsy, I say to thee, Arise, take up thy bed, and go into thy house. And immediately, rising up before them, he took up the bed on which he lay, and he went away to his own house, glorifying God. And all were astonished. They glorified God, and they were filled with fear, saying, We have seen wonderful things today. And after these things he went forth and saw a publican named Levi, sitting at the receipt of custom, and he said to him, Follow me. And leaving all things, he rose up and followed him. And Levi made him a great feast in his own house, and there was a great company of publicans and others that were at table with them. But the Pharisees and scribes murmured, saying to his disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with publicans and sinners?" And Jesus answering said to them, "They that are whole need not the physician, but they that are sick. I came not to call the just, but sinners to penance." And they said to him, "Why do the disciples of John fast often, and make prayers, and the disciples of the Pharisees in like manner? But thine eat and drink." To whom he said, "Can you make the children of the bridegroom fast, whilst the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come, when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them, and then shall they fast in those days." And he spoke also a similitude to them, that no man putteth a piece from a new garment upon an old garment, otherwise he both rendeth the new, and the piece taken from the new agreeth not with the old. And no man putteth new wine into old bottles, otherwise the new wine will break the bottles, and it will be spilled, and the bottles will be lost. But new wine must be put into new bottles, and both are preserved. And no man drinking old hath presently a mind to new, for he saith, the old is better. Okay, that's chapter 5. And you can see here in chapter 5, the first miracle here in chapter 5 is Jesus causes Simon, who's Peter, of course. Some people call him Simon Peter, but that's St. Peter. And then, of course, James and John, who were buddies of his, to have a huge catch of fish, so big that their boats were almost sinking. Which, of course, just proves, that Jesus can do anything and bring complete abundance when there's a dearth, because they said they were out all night and they didn't catch anything. And when Jesus gave a blessing or whatever he did, they caught tons of fish. So many were fed. So you can see that kind of is symbolically Jesus feeding us, right? Physically and spiritually. And then Jesus did some healings, right? He healed man with palsy, and that means paralyzed. And the guy was let down into a house through the roof, the open roof. They had those, and the Romans had that. They had like rooms where the roof was open. Okay, believe it or not, and it was inside the house, and you could kind of sit in there, But when it would rain, well, it didn't rain often, of course, in the Middle East, but in Rome it would rain more. But the rain would go in the middle, and there was sort of like a garden. But anyway, that's where they seemed to let him down. And Jesus heals the man, and of course says that, the Son of Man has power to forgive sins. That's him, of course. And the scribes and the Pharisees are upset because they say only God can forgive sins. Well, he was God on earth, right? So that's interesting. And his fame, of course, was growing because people came to listen to him talk because he spoke with authority, and, of course, to heal people. So people wanted to be healed of their sicknesses. And also there was someone who came to him who had, I believe, leprosy. Yeah, leprosy, which is a horrible disease where the body literally rots. It's a horrible death. But anyway, he healed a leper. And then, of course, he calls Levi, who is St. Matthew. And St. Matthew was a tax collector. And people did not look kindly upon tax collectors, and they saw them as great sinners. And Jesus goes to Matthew's house. Well, he calls Matthew to follow him. Then he goes to his house, and he's eating with all these sinners, right? These fellow tax collectors and maybe people who are stealing money from the government, from the poor. And the scribes and the Pharisees said, well, what are you doing with these people? And he says, well, they need help. They need a doctor. I'm here to call them. I didn't call to come to people that are good. I came to call the people that aren't good. Right? So that's a great reply, and it's the truth. And then they criticized him and said, well, how come your followers don't fast like John the Baptist do? He says, well, it's not the time for fasting because I'm still here. alluding to his eventual crucifixion and his departure from this earth. So that at that time, then they would be fasting as sort of like a mourning of his death. But of course, he was resurrected. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time.